Good afternoon. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Bill Beam. I'm the administrator of the Farm Service Agency, and I have the pleasure today of kicking off this meeting with you all to share with you some late coming via OBA to LIP, our Livestock Indemnity Program, and LFP, the Lost Forage Program. So we got a great team that has been working on this for a long time. I want to say thank you to my team. You know, on July the 4th of last year, the president signed the OBA provisions, or the Working Families Tax break that we have. And in less than a year, or pretty much right at a year, we were able to get all those provisions through the rulemaking and enacted and out to our producers who are patiently waiting for all of these things. So I just want to give a huge shout out to the team for getting it done in such a quick and orderly fashion. I also want to say thank you to all of our stakeholders that have joined us. You know, we're really in this together to try and help our producers. And I think you're probably going to like what you're about to hear. So that is truly our intent. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Jamie. And Jamie, take it away.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Administrator. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jamie White. I serve as an assistant to our Deputy Administrator for Farm Programs, Jared Haggart. Today, I have the honor and privilege of welcoming Kelly Bronig, who serves as our Livestock Program Manager for all of the livestock programs here at FSA, who is going to walk through the important updates and enhancements to both the Livestock Indemnity Program as well as the Livestock Forage Program. Before we get started and move to the purpose of this call, I'm just going to share a few items from the housekeeping perspective. Number one, as we conduct this webinar today, there will not be any voice option available to participants. We are going to record this webinar to ensure that we can distribute this to all of you who are in attendance and for those stakeholders who were not able to attend as well. Additionally, we do want to be able to answer questions in real time where possible. At the top of the Teams chat, everyone should have a Q&A option. Go ahead and drop any questions, comments you may have in the chat, and we will do our best to walk through those questions at the conclusion of Kelly's presentation. So again, our goal is to conduct the webinar today and provide follow-up via email after the stakeholder session that will include not only a recording of this session, but also the PowerPoint information that will be presented by Kelly. And with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Kelly to kick things off on the Livestock Forage Program. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Jamie. And yes, good afternoon and welcome to our call today. I've got the honor to provide you all a brief summary to the Working Family Tax Cuts Act updates that we had to our FSA Livestock Forage Disaster Program and the Livestock Indemnity Program. So I'll begin with the Livestock Forage Disaster Program, or LFP as we call it. So the updates that the Working Family Tax Cut Act implemented for LFP, basically for program year 2026 and subsequent years, the Act reduced the required D2 or severe drought duration thresholds that's determined by the U.S. Drought Monitor that enables producers to qualify for grazing loss benefits more quickly. So that D2 designation during the normal grazing period, they added a 4 consecutive week period for a 1-month payment factor, and they changed the 8 consecutive weeks to 7 of the previous 8 consecutive weeks, and they changed that to a 2-month payment factor. So this is just a brief visual to kind of show you how it was prior to. We had the 8 consecutive weeks at 1 month, and here now we have 4 consecutive weeks for 1 month, and the 7 out of 8 is now a 2-month payment, and all other criteria stayed the same. So as a rule publication, we now are generating these weekly eligibility reports from the data we get from the Drought Monitor, and that has all been updated. and uploaded in our software for producers to make application based off of that 4 consecutive weeks or 7 out of 8. That upload also may have updated the date of qualifying drought and did update the payment factors as applicable. So that date of qualifying drought is, well, let's first go over, I did a quick summary here this morning of what additional states and counties we had that are now newly eligible because of the 4-week criteria only. And as of today, that includes about 235 counties, and this ranks the top 10 states that were impacted, with Virginia being the number 1 and Tennessee being the next. So back to that beginning date of qualifying drought, that is very important to our eligibility determinations. And so now it is that date. To give you a little background of, that's the earliest date of either the last day of the 4 consecutive week period, or the last day of the 7 out of 8 consecutive week period, or the first day a county was rated D3 or D4 by the drought monitor. Prior to our rule publication implementing the Working Family Tax Cut Act updates, we were using the legacy D2 drought criteria to determine our program eligibility. That program eligibility, that drought criteria uses for all producer, livestock, and land eligibility determinations. So, example, Mitchell County, Texas, their original date of qualifying drought, or sometimes refer that to the trigger date, for native pasture was March 30th. That was their 8 weeks at D2. So after the implementation of WFTCA, the new date of qualifying drought for Mitchell County is March 2nd, which is at 4 weeks at D2. So all approved applications, 26 applications, 853s that were approved prior to the date of rule publication, will remain in approved status, and there's no required revision by the applicant or county office, but the producers will be notified of such date and change and be given the opportunity, if they so choose, and if it's advantageous to them, such as if that March 2nd date now they had more livestock inventory, or they had additional land that would impact their LFP application in a positive manner. So again, the updated D2 drought intensity payment factors and payment amounts have been processed and updated through the LFP payment software. And so the enrolled applications, which means we have a producer signature, but it has not been determined eligible by the county committee, those applicants will be also notified that they will now need to review those applications if they had an updated date in qualifying drought, and make sure that their applicable livestock inventories and land interests are accurate, and sign a new 853 with that updated date of qualifying drought. We are doing this because we need to implement the rules as the rule publication date of July 9th. And so we need to ensure that county committees have the accurate data to make producer, livestock, and land eligibility determinations. The LFP public page has been updated with the payment rates. I just threw these in for information purposes, and those can be found at this website link. That is it for LFP updates. Move on to Livestock Indemnity Program, or the LIP program. So the updates from the Working Family Tax Cuts Act for LIP included for 2026 program year and subsequent years, we will now be providing the producer an option to provide an alternative market value. And with that change, that also gave us an opportunity to look at how we establish those market values, and made some changes accordingly that's used in the payment calculation. For 26 and forward, it also includes compensation for predation losses or eligible attack losses to 100% versus 75 as they were in prior years. This update also included assistance for unborn livestock death losses, which were retroactive back to January 1st of 2024. So again, for 2026 and moving forward, producers now can request an alternative market price with the verifiable sales documentation for their specific operation. So this just lists the items that needs to be on that documentation. Obviously has to have the name and contact information of the buyer. The applicant for applying for benefits must be listed as the seller or grower, and the number of livestock sold and the market price received per head by the livestock kind and type weight class that the producer is applying for benefits for, and the location and date of sale, which must be within the same program year of the eligible loss event. And that alternative market value cannot exceed 145% of the determined national average market value. Just another requirement that this documentation and sales data must come from a verifiable sales transaction originating from an independent commercial market source, such as an auction barn, sale barn, processing facility, etc. Contract growers, it's a little more streamlined because the only thing that they probably can provide is their contract grower production contract for that same livestock kind and weight range. If it's higher than our price that we have established, they can use that alternative price not to exceed 145%. So with that change, providing producers that option, it also, again, like I said, gave us an opportunity to look at how we establish national average market value. So we've included the same that we have always used, but we've just enhanced it a bit. So now we will be using the higher of the following. This is what we typically have done in recent years or years prior to now, is we establish that national average market value by livestock kind, type, and weight class at the beginning of the program year, and that's based on prior year market data as determined by CCC. We've added in the option that we could also use the end of year program year value for the current year market data, which again will also be used for the next program year's beginning of the year. So we will pay on the higher of those two or the higher of the producer's verifiable market value that they have provided, not to exceed 145%. So that's added some flexibility and added some ability to incorporate some current market year data for producer assistance. I've also included the 26 national average market values that will be used in the payment calculation. Again, this is 100% of the national value. These are provided on the LIP public page at this address as well. I've included them here. This is for the contract growers. And another update to our payment calculations, the eligible attack losses now will be paid at 100% of the determined market value versus 75 that they were in years prior. Again, eligible attacks, I should have included the definition here, but those are attacks by animals reintroduced into the wild by the federal government or protected by federal law, including wolves and avian predators, that directly results in the death of eligible livestock in excess of normal mortality or injured livestock sold at a reduced price. And so all other losses due to an eligible weather event or diseases, eligible diseases will be paid at a rate of 75% as in years past. Moving on to probably the biggest update to LIP is the adding of unborn livestock death loss eligibility. for producers retroactively back to January 1 of 2024, as I mentioned. So eligible producers may receive additional benefits for eligible adult female livestock that were gestating at the time of their death due to an eligible loss condition. So ineligible livestock are injured livestock that were sold due to an eligible loss condition, and livestock that are stillborn or aborted from adult females that did not die as a result of the eligible loss condition. Again, the eligibility determines on the death of the adult female. These are the livestock categories that are eligible for unborn livestock, basically all livestock kind that gestate, and this obviously would exclude poultry. Another specification in the Act directly was to include a birthing factor. So this birthing factor is supposed to represent the average number of birthed animals per gestational cycle for each species for one adult female. So all the common breeds that typically only have one offspring are listed here. The differentials are deer, goats, and sheep have a birthing factor of 2, and swine have a birthing factor of 12. And those were specifically outlined in the Act. So also specifically included in the Act was the unborn payment factor is to be issued at no more than 85% of the adult female rate. So in 24 and 25, we've got a mixture of different livestock kinds, basically on how we categorize them. So the alpaca, caribou, deer, and elk, equine, and llamas were previously identified as an all category. So they will get paid at a 40% factor of the all rate. But the beef cattle and those that are identified by adult, non-adult, and sex, they will be paid at an 85% rate for 24, 25, and 26. We've updated the categories for 26, so they will all be paid at an 85% factor. So to quickly review how we're implementing this 24 and 25 retroactively, these will include additional payment for the eligible livestock that have been previously identified as female. Again, as I mentioned, some of those categories were identified as all, so those applications will need to be provided the opportunity to be revised to identify the female losses. We are not asking for bred status because that data is probably not available 1 to 2 years past that time, and we found it through our data that most livestock breeds are gestating nearly at least 3/4 of the year. So we're making the assumption that the livestock were bred for easier and less producer burden and implementation on the producers and the county offices. So obviously the deadlines for those program years have passed, and I just want to remind everyone that we are not reopening or extending those application periods, and no new applications will be considered by the county committee. So that payment calculation for 24 and 25 is the eligible adult female livestock times the payment rate. I'll go over any reductions equals the payment amount. And again, this is for after any normal mortality has been applied. An additional normal mortality will not be applied to unborn livestock for 24 and 25. So to get this implemented as streamlined as possible for those categories that are identified, by gender here is the beef cattle, beefalo, buffalo, like I mentioned before, dairy cattle, because we have those adult female rates. So how for 24 and 25, how these are payment rates are calculated is we're looking at the lowest weight category. So for beef, for example, that's the less than 400-pound payment rate times the 85% times the birthing factor. And then for 24 and 25, we're adding that amount to the original adult female payment rate and updating the payment rate to include that unborn factor payment. And so additional payments will automatically be issued. So for example, for beef cows, an additional payment would be the difference of this $1,998 versus the $1,465, or $533.68 to be specific. So this table shows how that's calculated for both 24 and 25. And just to give you an update, as of now, those payments that have went out for that added criteria for the females has been about $6 million to date. So for those categories that I previously mentioned as all, we've added the unborn categories for those, and we've calculated those payment rates based on the adult payment rate and that 40%, as I mentioned, and the birthing factors. So producers will be provided the opportunity to come in and revise their application, identifying of those adult animals, how many were female, and the county office will then put that number in, not to exceed the number that eligible death losses after normal mortality at these payment rates, and an additional payment will be issued to those producers in 24 and 25. Swine is a little differently because handled a little differently because we do have a lowest weight payment rate for those swine. However, the categories include both boars and sows, or barrows and gilts. So we still need to get that identification of which ones were females. So supporting documentation for 24-25 is not required for producers to receive these additional unborn livestock death losses, but they may provide acceptable documentation if they so choose. For 2026, we've updated the application for payment to include that certification by the livestock owners that to identify, and this now moving 26 and forward, we'll be asking which ones were bred at the time of death. So the eligible unborn livestock payment will be the lesser of the eligible livestock deaths or the eligible bred livestock from the application, again, after normal mortality of the adult females. So again, the producers will certify that number on the 852. That's required for all eligible livestock kinds beginning in 2026, if applicable. And the producer certification must be supported by reliable or verifiable documentation if requested by the county committee. And here are the rates for the 2026 rates for unborn livestock for livestock owners. Again, using that 85% of the lowest weight category or non-adult rate times the birthing factors. The tax will be paid at 100% and all other losses will be paid at 75%. And this is the contract grower rate for swine. That's the only eligible category for that. So that is a very brief summary of the updates to LIP and LFP based off of the Working Families Tax Cut Act. Again, I'd reference you to those public pages as well. It includes comprehensive information that I just reviewed. So I will thank you again for your time and attention today, and I will turn it back over to Jamie.
Thank you, Kelly, for the very thorough updates for both LFP and LIP. Right now, we don't have any questions that are pending in the chat. I'd like to give folks a few minutes just to, again, drop those questions that we could review before closing out today, before signing off. Again, hitting on a couple of high points that Kelly did share. Of course, certainly there are significant changes to both LIP and LFP that will favorably affect producers impacted by losses moving forward. But again, I do want to amplify that with the announcement of the recent provisions, as Kelly indicated, under LIP, we have quickly expedited assistance for unborn losses that were suffered in 24 and 25 and issued those through direct payments without producer interaction late last week. And additionally, the important enhancements to LFP, that earlier trigger, that 4-week trigger, that certainly does have retroactive applicability, and we are working to get that critical assistance out the door as expeditiously as possible. As always, if there are additional questions after the call, in the PowerPoint, Kelly has shared her contact information. You will have an email address to which you can submit questions, but we will follow up this call with a recording as well as the PowerPoint presentations for both LFP and LIP. So with that, there aren't any additional questions. We will go ahead and conclude today's call. And again, thank you for your participation and supporting farmers and ranchers throughout the nation. Have a great day.